Matthew has worked across art and media platforms and collaborated with musicians since the mid-90s, creating works where light, space, and sound reflect on the intricacies of perception. Welcome, Matthew.
I come from a really standard kind of background. I actually studied intermedia arts, it was called at the time, in the sort of 90s around Chicago. As soon as I graduated, I moved to San Francisco and first started volunteering at this place called Artist Television Access, and became kind of a director there. And while I was in San Francisco doing some, living and making work and doing research, I started to come across these kind of early, I'm going to call it computer art because they're analog computers, but this is really like, these are sort of patch bay-based works that were sometimes installed, sometimes performed upon, sometimes hopefully broadcast. And these are sort of big inspirations for the way that I build some of my software-based tools. And I think they're kind of the precursor to a lot of the software, the sort of visual programming software tools. You can start to see a lot of things that look, maybe some of the things that we see today kind of look brand new, but these were kind of direct manipulations of the electromagnetic signal. I think it gets to the point of where we're at today with kind of computer or digital art. And this is sort of like the template for computer art today. You have an input, it interprets it, it tweaks it with an algorithm, maybe it's stored in memory, maybe something from memory is recalled, and then its output is anything. So before I jump into the purely audio-visual thing, I'm just going to talk a little bit on the side in terms of this kind of open source and design kind of activist work. I've been working in the Arctic with Inuit hunters and artists to sort of build new kind of media systems and ways to be out on the land, but still be connected back to the internet, let's say, and still sort of be isolated yet and insulated and connected all at the same time. And moving more into the audio-visual zone and staying with that kind of idea of open space, open source, but just to try to open space and talk about the electromagnetic spectrum, which is where all this, video, Wi-Fi data is broadcast, but it's how to reclaim some space on the spectrum. And the results are kind of these bigger installations, but there's always some audio-visual kind of real-time grabbing of not just data, but imagery and sounds just directly from the air, which also results in kind of installation works. This is a really recent work that is, we should take nothing for granted on the building of an alert and knowledgeable citizenry. So it's also, these works are not just audio-visual, but it's trying to place it in a kind of a political context as well as create an interesting sort of experience, I guess. Simultaneously, I'm also really interested, because of these kind of ideas about the spectrum and the signal, the video signal, it kind of comes back and re-relates to these ideas of what makes a computer image. This is a really sort of simple piece, I guess, but it kind of gets really to the root of some of my concerns. It's just R plus G plus B, and it basically is a cyclical out-of-phase relationship of the RGB formula, which creates this sort of background color. But it becomes a very synesthetic sort of experience, immersive experience. This is a version for screen, but I've done it as a large projection. And it's just, for me, it relates to kind of the first time that we can actually give a formula for a color. Color is a very personal experience, and more I'm starting to work in relation to our own human perception. And after making these kind of smaller pieces, I've started to expand out into sort of larger scale installations. This is Event Horizon. which is like a 3-channel piece, multi-projection with some scrims and projection on the floor. It's like the edge of the classical definition is sort of the edge of the black hole. And as we are now starting to learn, it's not really where nothing can escape, but at the time I understood it as a place where nothing could escape, even light would not escape the black hole. What are sort of some of the colors that we can't see, or what happens to light when it disappears? And this sort of idea became interesting as I also started to explore some ideas around the moire pattern, which it's hard to tell in this kind of lower res image. There is that center horizon line is this constantly shifting moire pattern, and then the vertical stripes are the colors which make up the moire. And what I find interesting about that, and in relation to the sort of event horizon, is the moire pattern is, it's 2 plus 2 equals 5, I suppose. There's something there that gets added that isn't there. This is, again, a generative piece. This is actually the first time I've ever made interactive work. But it's also, this piece really exists mostly as an installation, as a multi-screen installation. So from certain points of perspective, you have this kind of broken screen that's playing some generative imagery on it. And when you get into the right point of view, it sort of creates this anamorphosis. We each have our own kind of point of perception, and it's playing with this idea of kind of multi-stable imagery, trying to find areas where the audio illusion and the visual illusion have their sort of like complementary effects together. This is just another view. I should say that perspection is sort of site-specific. I mean, it's not sort of, it is site-specific. Now that, computers are able to, you can't recognize the difference between CGI and reality, where do we place ourselves as kind of new media artists? I don't even use sort of digital. For me, I'm really wrapped up in this idea. I think so many times that we see these performances at MUTEC and other festivals, it's like, it's always trying to depict this space, and there's like this 3D thing that's kind of moving around. And so this piece kind of plays with this idea of surface and space. And I mean, I think color can draw out those things anyway. There's kind of colors naturally come forward or recede based on their sort of hue and value and things like that. There's also these ideas of working like serially that are very important to me. I feel like these computer programs are more of a loose set of instructions than like a hard and fast code. That it gives us some leeway, and I feel like I'm just sort of sculpting things in a particular direction and then kind of letting them, there's a wide range of places for it to go, and it kind of, in a way, relieves you of your decisions up to a certain degree. I mean, it's a little bit like maybe a Solowit wall drawing. I think the work exists first as a set of instructions versus these kinds of the results of it. I mean, and ultimately, that's kind of what we're doing, is building this code base, I suppose, that will hopefully live on beyond the time that it can be played on this computer and can be transferred to things in the future. So with that, I suppose I will leave it to our next speaker and go on from there. So thank you.